Elections Now, and I am here with my iced coffee to talk to you about why the Electoral College is dysfunctional. This is a Better Elections Now educational presentation, and I invite you to contact us. We have a website, betterelectionsnow.org. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, the YouTube channel, which you already know. And you could email us at betterelectionsnow@gmail.com. And this presentation is free to share. And you will find the link to the Google slide presentation, which you can also view in the description on YouTube. As I said, I'm the co-founder and co-president of Better Elections Now, which is a group that I founded in 2016 to help lobby the presidential electors to choose someone other than Trump and Clinton. And unfortunately, that didn't work. In my normal life, I am a lecturer in social sciences at my beloved Boston University's College of General Studies. And my dissertation was on free speech in times of crisis. Before I get to the Electoral College, I want to show you this slide. I would strongly suggest that you go to the Google slide presentation and make use of these links, or I suppose pause the video and look them up yourself. These are wonderful locations to get good sources of information about this election, any election, the polling data, and also there are fact-checking websites. One of the things that Americans have failed at is fact-checking themselves. And we need to do a better job of that. So I've given you some fact-checking websites. So I would really ask you to please check them out. Also, this year, a new website has appeared called csay2020.com. And when you go to the polls, if you see any voter suppression or intimidation, go immediately to csay2020.com, and you can ask for immediate help, immediate legal help. So please make sure that everyone you know knows about this website, and please report any form of voter suppression or intimidation that you witness. So why is the Electoral College system such a mess? Well, let's take a look. So as you hopefully know, the President of the United States is not popularly elected. He or she is indirectly elected by the American voters. The only people who are constitutionally qualified to elect the President of the United States are the 538 presidential electors that are chosen by popular votes in all 50 states every 4 years. Washington, D.C. also has the right to elect presidential electors, 3 of them, but that was by an amendment to the Constitution in 1964, and no other territories do, which is problem number 1. Not enough people are represented in this vote. So just briefly, what happens in a presidential election is that stage 1, the political parties hold primary elections to choose a nominee. The nominee then appoints what's called the slate of electors in that state for his or her party. So in 2020, Donald Trump and Joe Biden have each chosen individually all 50, well, 51 with DC, all 51 slates of presidential electors for 2020 that will be chosen on election day, which is in about 4 days from now, 5 days from now, have been handpicked by Trump and by Biden to ensure their loyalty. The parties then collect enough signatures to get whatever they need to get the presidential candidates on the state ballot. And then problem number 2, election day being the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. I can't tell you how angry this makes me that we still do this. It has to change. It should be pushed to the first Monday in May. That's the appropriate day, with that being a state and federal holiday. But anyway, because our Constitution is dysfunctional and doesn't work well, we have election day in November every year. On that day, what is chosen are the presidential electors. On the first Monday after the second Wednesday in December, for some unaccountable reason, the electors meet in their state capital. So they do not all meet together. And maybe that would be an interesting reform to have. What if all the presidential electors met in a big room and argued and negotiated? That might be an interesting experiment. So each elector casts one vote for president, one vote for vice president. Each candidate must be 35 years or older, and they can't be from the same state. And then once that's done, the ballots are sent to Congress. And when Congress opens, the ballots are counted and a winner is declared by the sitting vice president. So that's what's going to happen between Election Day 2020 and the day that Congress convenes in 2021. Also, just briefly, if there's a tie or no one wins a majority, the election goes to the House of Representatives. Here's another defect. In this case, every state in the House of Representatives gets one vote to choose the president, regardless of their population. That's ridiculous and outrageous. The Senate chooses the vice president, and they each have one vote. And if Congress can't elect someone by the time we get to Inauguration Day, then the sitting Speaker of the House becomes acting president. If the Senate has elected a vice president, but the House has not elected the president, then the vice president is sworn in and becomes acting president. So here are the dysfunctions. The Electoral College was designed to protect slavery. Now, theoretically, it was also to provide a safety valve in case a demagogue were to be elected. So in reality, the Electoral College system was designed specifically, according to what the founders said, to stop someone like Donald Trump, and it failed. It did not work. That's why the Constitution has entirely failed at this point. So it was to protect slavery, but they said it was to provide a safety valve, which just failed because they didn't like democracy. I mean, think about it. The Founding Fathers wrote a constitution that kept men exactly like themselves in power. There was no difference before and after the revolution, right? Slavery still existed. Women couldn't vote. The poor couldn't vote. Non-landowners couldn't vote in many states. What are now rapidly becoming African Americans can't vote. They wrote a constitution that kept themselves in power. As a consequence, rural states have too much power, as I will demonstrate to you shortly. Now, 48 states use the winner-take-all system. The winner of the statewide popular vote is awarded all of that state's electoral votes, which disenfranchises at least half the population. There are 2 states that do not, and I'll address them very shortly. And the winner-take-all system really does mandate a 2-party system, which is wrong. Democracies need lots of parties. So because each state elects 2 senators regardless of their population, the Senate, and thus the Electoral College, is way out of balance. So consider, for example, and by the way, I did an earlier presentation that you can go watch right after this one on the dysfunctions in the US electoral system. It's a longer presentation, and I cover this in that, along with some of the other problems with the Senate and the House. So I'd encourage you to go watch that next. So small states, the 26 smallest states in the Union accounts for 18% of the US population. They control 52 Senate seats, so a majority of Senate seats, and almost half the electoral votes needed to be president. So the system gives way too much power to the small states and to the rural states, which was on purpose originally, of course, because they wanted to protect slavery. Twice in 16 years, a Democratic candidate won the popular vote for president, and the Republican won the electoral vote. That is dysfunctional. It should have been fixed. Why this wasn't fixed when the Democrats won the elections in 2008, I don't understand. This needs to be fixed. It keeps returning a bad result, which means the system has to be fixed. Here is a map showing you the number of presidential electors per state. Maine and Nebraska award their votes proportionally, as I'll talk about in just a moment. So here's the formula again, and this is all wrong because it gives too much power to small states. You add the number of senators you elect plus the number of representatives you elect, and that gives you your presidential electors. So Texas elects 36 members of the House, 2 senators, as all states do. So Texas has 38 presidential electors. Now, as I said earlier, these electors are handpicked by the presidential candidate themselves to ensure loyalty. So they are pledged to vote for a candidate if they win, if they're elected as presidential electors. However, in most states, a presidential elector is not prevented from casting their vote for anyone who is constitutionally qualified. When this happens, and it happens rarely, but it does happen, they are referred to as faithless electors, meaning that they pledged to vote for candidate A, but when they met in the Electoral College, they actually voted for candidate B. That's a faithless elector. So that was the whole point of me founding Better Elections Now with my friends and my colleagues. I'm a co-founder of it. We were lobbying the presidential electors to exercise that authority and choose someone other than Trump and Clinton. It didn't work, but that was the point. And there was a lot of different groups that tried that in 2016 between the day of the election in November and the meeting of the Electoral College. So in some states, they are replaced if they try to do that with an alternate, and other states, they face a fine, but as far as I know, the fine is almost never imposed if someone is a faithless elector. So that's how each of the states get their presidential electors. But who has the power to appoint those electors? Well, it's actually the state legislature. The Constitution gives the power to the state legislature to appoint a slate of presidential electors. Now, every state and DC has devolved that power to a popular vote. However, a state legislature can, at least in theory, override the popular vote and choose their own slate of electors. And this almost happened in Florida in the year 2000. When it was not clear that the recount would be finished by the day the presidential electors were to meet. And the Republican legislature in Florida threatened to appoint their own slate. So if that happened, it would have to go through a normal legislative process because you would have to repeal the law that granted the power to the popular vote and then appoint a different slate of electors. And that would require the consent of the governor. And of course, it would immediately trigger a court challenge, immediately. So it is possible that it is a successful move in 2020. Let's say, Texas voted for Biden, but the Texas legislature then overrode that and appointed a Trump slate. That could happen. Yes, there are some roadblocks in the way, but there was articles this summer that was one of the avenues the Trump campaign was thinking about trying to go down. So that's really worrying, of course. So that's something that you should look into. So when you and I go to vote for president, what we see is the name of the candidate that we like, as you see on the left-hand side. But what we're actually doing is we're voting for a slate of presidential electors who have pledged to vote for the candidate that we like in whatever it is, like 4 weeks' time, something like that. Now, another defect under first past the post voting, which is what we use, which is terrible. I did several videos on proportional voting, which you should look at after you watch my other video on the dysfunctions. A slate of electors can be chosen with very little popular vote, depending on how many people are on the ballot. Often, it's below 50% of the vote. That seems wrong to me. Here, of course, is the nightmare that I mentioned earlier. The 26 smallest states control almost half the electoral votes needed. This is a huge discrepancy. Now, it's also true that in national elections, the Republican Party only wins when it cheats. And it does so by voter suppression laws, like voter ID, closing polling stations. The governor of Texas, Governor Abbott, made it so that you could only have one ballot drop-off place per county. So they only win when they cheat, and they've gotten very good at cheating. So that's part of the reason why Hillary Clinton lost, because of voter suppression. Trump won by 77,000 votes in a couple of states. That's what did it. And it's totally clear that the voter suppression laws in those states contributed to Clinton losing. But there's also a huge problem with apathy. And that apathy has meant that whether Clinton or Trump won, less than 20% of the population is choosing the president. That can't be right, and that requires major overhaul, as far as I'm concerned. So the remainder of this presentation, I've given you some examples, and I don't want to dwell too long on them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show each slide. I'll make a few comments. You can pause and read each of the slides, and you'll get the point that I'm trying to make. But I don't want to spend too much time on this because these are various examples of issues with the Electoral College. So the first one for your reference would be the 1824 presidential election, where Andrew Jackson won the popular vote and he won the most electoral votes out of the votes available. But when the election went to Congress, John Quincy Adams was elected president. And that pretty much destroyed his chances at having a successful presidency, which is unfortunate. The charge was that there was a corrupt bargain between John Quincy Adams and Henry Clay. And Clay had sort of told his electors to go for Adams. There's no evidence that there was a corrupt bargain. But Jackson certainly made that charge for the next 4 years, and then he won the election in 1828. So it's possible that the winner of the popular vote, the person that gets the most electoral votes, is denied the office. That's a ridiculous system that should be changed. I mentioned unfaithful electors, and there were a few in 2016. So here is the Electoral College count on election night, and from election night until the Electoral College met. Clinton, as you know, won the popular vote by almost 3 million votes. But Trump won the Electoral College 306 to 232, which means that Trump was up 74 electoral votes. But when the Electoral College met in December, 7 electors changed their votes. 2 Trump electors voted for different candidates. One voted for Ron Paul, and the other voted for John Kasich, the Ohio governor, Republican governor. One Clinton elector in Hawaii voted for Bernie Sanders, and three voted for, in Washington State, 3 voted for Powell, and 1 voted for Spotted Eagle. She was the first Native American woman ever to receive an electoral vote. So the safety valve can be useful if we don't want to abolish the Electoral College. And actually, really the simplest thing to do with the Electoral College is just award the winner of the popular vote 50 additional electoral votes. That's it. And then you can keep the rest of the system if you want. The idea, though, of having a safety valve is not a bad one, but that would sort of have to be revitalized in some sense. And I mentioned that Maine and Nebraska award their electoral votes proportionally. So basically, the winner of the statewide popular vote gets 2, and then the winner of each congressional district gets 1. So here's what they look like. Nebraska has, I think, 3 congressional districts. Maine has 2. So Maine has 4 electoral votes, and Nebraska has 5. In 2016, 3 of Maine's electoral votes went to Clinton, 1 went to Trump. In 2008, in Nebraska, 4 went to McCain and 1 to Obama. I think that this is superior because it means that people are not disenfranchised. So changing that is pretty simple too. And then finally, I just gave you a couple of slides on presidential succession and removal. So what I would suggest is I'm going to pause on these 2 slides for about 10 seconds, pause them, read them. They're just for your edification, and then I'll conclude. And the final slide. I wish to thank you very, very much for watching my presentation on why the Electoral College is dysfunctional. You can find us on the web, betterelectionsnow.org. You can email me at betterelectionsnow@gmail.com. We are on Twitter, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we're on YouTube. Please remember that the only poll that counts is the poll taken on election day. So please go vote. And I wish to leave you with the two philosophies that have made a big difference to me in my life. Be harmless and blameless, and hope for the happiness of all people, as I hope for your happiness. Thank you so much for joining me, and please look out for more videos. Thank you. Be safe. Goodbye.